Drop that thing, Omega, or you'll wish the moon had never made you. Emily Carter heard Tyler Blackwell's voice tear through the midnight forest behind her, sharp enough to cut through the wind, but she did not stop running. Snow stung her bare ankles. Pine branches scraped her sleeves. Her breath came in broken clouds, white and frantic beneath the black sky, while the injured wolf pup trembled against her chest like a small, fading heartbeat wrapped in silver-white fur. Only an hour ago, the entire Midnight Hollow pack had stood around the gathering stone and watched Tyler reject her beneath the full moon. They had watched him lift his chin, smile for the crowd, and speak the words that turned her from unwanted into officially discarded. No one had stepped forward. No one had looked sorry. Some had even clapped when he chose Vanessa Reed, the beta's daughter with polished curls, a perfect dress, and the kind of confidence Emily had never been allowed to own. Emily had stood there in her faded blue gown, the hem damp with snow, her mother's old embroidered handkerchief pressed inside her palm, and she had told herself not to cry. Not when Vanessa spilled cider near her shoes and laughed as if it were an accident. Not when someone whispered that even the moon goddess must have made a mistake. Not when Tyler leaned close enough for only her to hear and said, "You should be grateful I set you free. A girl like you was never meant to stand beside an alpha." She had survived the words. She had survived the laughter. She had survived the long walk away from the torchlight while the pack's celebration rose behind her like a door closing forever. But she had not survived the sound she heard near the old creek crossing, a weak, frightened whimper from beneath a fallen pine. At first, Emily thought it was the wind. Then she saw him, a wolf pup, no bigger than a farm dog, curled in the snow with a thin iron collar around his neck and one small leg tucked wrong beneath him. His fur was pale as moonlit frost, streaked with silver that did not look ordinary, and his amber eyes opened when she knelt beside him. He did not growl. He did not bite. He only looked at her as if he had already been passed by too many times. Footprints surrounded the clearing. Heavy boots. Pack boots. People had seen him. People had chosen to keep walking. Something inside Emily went very still. Maybe it was the part of her they called weak. Maybe it was the part of her mother that still lived in her hands. She slipped off her shawl, wrapped the trembling pup carefully, and lifted him against her chest. That was when Tyler found her. He stepped from the trees with two others behind him, his handsome face twisted with disgust. "Leave it," he ordered. "It could bring trouble." Emily backed away, holding the pup tighter. "He's hurt." Tyler laughed, cold and easy. "Everything hurt finds you, doesn't it?" The pup shivered, and Emily felt his tiny breath flutter against her collarbone. She looked at Tyler, at the boys who had once been her pack, at the dark trail leading home. Her voice came out quiet, but it did not break. "Then I'll take him somewhere safe." Tyler's smile vanished. "You don't get to decide what's safe." Emily turned and ran. Now the forest blurred around her, 12 miles of northern wilderness stretching under a sky full of hard silver stars. Her lungs burned. Her feet slipped over hidden roots. The pup grew heavier with every step, not because he weighed much, but because fear did. Behind her, the shouts faded and returned with the wind. Ahead, past the creek and the ridge, waited the little cabin at the edge of pack land, the only place still willing to hold her name. Emily pressed her cheek to the pup's cold head and whispered, "Stay with me. Please, don't leave too." For one impossible second, warmth flickered beneath her fingers, soft as moonlight under skin, then vanished before she could understand it. She stumbled, caught herself against a birch tree, and kept moving. She did not know that far beyond the ridge, riders from the northern throne were already searching the woods. She did not know that the child in her arms belonged to the most feared alpha king alive. And she did not know that in saving the life everyone else ignored, she had just pulled her own destiny out of the snow. Emily reached the cabin with her legs trembling and her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. The little house waited at the edge of Midnight Hollow territory, half hidden between pine trees and a frozen creek, its windows dark, its roof carrying a thin white blanket of snow. It had belonged to her mother once, back when the Carter name still meant healing hands and warm bread and a door that never closed on the wounded. Now it was just the place where the pack sent Emily when they wanted to forget she existed. She shouldered the door open and stepped inside, bringing the cold with her. The room smelled of cedar smoke, dried lavender, and loneliness. A small iron stove sat cold in the corner. 2 chairs, 1 table, 1 narrow bed, and a shelf of old jars were all she had left, but to the shivering pup in her arms, it was shelter. "You are safe now," she whispered, though she was not sure either of them truly were. She laid him on the quilt her mother had sewn years ago, then lit the last good candle with fingers that would not stop shaking. In the small amber glow, the pup looked even younger. His paws were too large for his body, his ears tipped with frost, his silver-white fur tangled with burrs and snow. The iron collar around his neck was not pack work. Emily knew that at once. Midnight Hollow used leather bands for training pups. This collar was narrow, dark, and marked with a symbol she had seen only once before in an old warning carved near the northern border. A broken crown beneath 3 thorns. Smugglers. The kind of people who stole what powerful wolves would pay to get back. A chill moved through her that had nothing to do with winter. "Who took you?" she breathed. The pup opened his eyes, those strange amber eyes too knowing for something so small, and gave a faint whimper. Emily swallowed the ache in her throat and moved quickly. She warmed water on the stove, tore clean strips from an old sheet, and washed the snow from his fur with the careful touch her mother had taught her. Never rush pain. Never let fear make your hands rough. Those words came back so clearly that for a moment Emily almost heard her mother behind her, humming softly while steam rose from a basin. In Midnight Hollow, strength meant teeth, claws, rank, and command. Her mother had believed strength could also be quiet. A cup of tea placed in shaking hands. A blanket over cold shoulders. A wound cleaned without judgment. That belief had made her beloved by the poor and dismissed by the powerful. After she died, Emily inherited the dismissal without the love. The pack called her soft. Tyler called her useless. The elders called her a burden that had not yet found a purpose. Emily looked down at the pup and pressed a folded cloth against his side with gentle pressure. "Maybe they are right about me," she whispered, her voice cracking in the candlelight. "But they were wrong to leave you." Outside, wind moved through the trees like a distant warning. Somewhere beyond the creek, Tyler and his friends were still searching or pretending they were not afraid to enter the dark woods after midnight. Emily knew what would happen if they found her. They would say she had endangered the pack. They would say an Omega had no right to make choices. They would drag the pup away and call it duty. Her hands tightened around the cloth. For the first time that night, fear did not make her smaller. It made her still. The pup's breathing changed, growing thin and uneven. Emily leaned closer. "No. No, stay with me." She added another blanket, checked his injured leg, and felt panic rising when his tiny body went limp beneath her palms. Her chest squeezed as if the rejection bond had snapped all over again. She had lost a mate who never loved her. She had lost a mother who had. She would not lose this child of the forest just because no one else cared. Tears slipped down her cheeks and fell into his fur. Emily placed both hands over his small chest. "Please," she whispered. "I do not know what I am doing, but if there is anything in me worth having, take it. Just breathe." The candle flame bent toward her though there was no draft. A pale glow stirred beneath her fingers, soft at first, then warmer, like moonlight caught under water. Emily froze, breath caught in her throat. The glow spread over the pup's fur in thin, silver lines. His small chest lifted once, then again. Outside the cabin, unseen beyond the frosted window, a tall man in a black cloak stepped from the trees and went perfectly still, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the light pouring from the rejected Omega's hands. For a heartbeat, Emily thought the light had come from the moon, slipping through the frost-clouded window and pooling over her hands by accident. Then the pup breathed again, a tiny, trembling sound that broke the silence of the cabin, and the glow answered him. It moved beneath her skin like warm water, silver and soft, wrapping around his small body without heat, without pain, without anything that felt frightening. Emily stared at her own fingers as if they belonged to someone else. Omegas did not do this. Omegas carried trays, scrubbed floors, lowered their eyes, and learned which hallways to avoid when high-ranking wolves were in cruel moods. They did not call light from their palms. They did not pull breath back into the chest of a dying wolf pup. The pup's ears twitched. His amber eyes opened halfway, unfocused but alive. Emily let out a shaky laugh that sounded almost like a sob. "There you are," she whispered. "Good boy. Stay with me." He blinked once. then pressed his cold nose weakly against her wrist. The touch was so trusting that it nearly undid her. She bent over him, shielding him with her body while the strange glow faded, leaving only candlelight and the quiet pop of the stove. Her hands still tingled. Her chest felt hollow and full at the same time, as if something long buried had stretched awake inside her. Outside, snow brushed against the cabin walls. She did not hear the man beyond the window move away. King Alexander Frost had crossed 3 counties in less than 2 days, following rumors, broken scents, and the fading trail of his stolen son. He had ridden from the northern throne with 20 royal guards, but when the trail split near Midnight Hollow, he had gone ahead alone. He trusted silence more than numbers. He trusted instinct more than law. And every instinct in him had gone still at the sight of the rejected Omega kneeling in a poor cabin, glowing like the first moonrise after a long winter. Alexander was a tall man, broad-shouldered beneath a black travel cloak dusted with snow, his face pale and carved with the kind of control that made other wolves lower their voices before speaking to him. His silver-gray eyes were fixed on the pup, Rowan, his son, alive. The relief that moved through him was so sharp he had to close one gloved hand around the windowsill to steady it. For 3 nights, he had imagined every terrible possibility without allowing fear to show on his face. Kings were not given the mercy of panic. Fathers were. And in that fragile moment, hidden outside a cabin that belonged to a girl his court would have overlooked without a second thought, Alexander was not a king first. He was a father watching his child breathe. Inside, Emily reached for a chipped bowl of warm water and continued cleaning the pup with slow, careful motions. She checked the iron collar again, frowning at the broken crown and 3 thorns stamped into its dark metal. "This is not from here," she murmured. The pup gave a weak sound, almost an answer. I know it hurts. I am going to get it off you." She searched the shelf for her mother's old tools and found a small file wrapped in cloth. Her hands shook as she worked the collar's clasp, not forcing it, not rushing. "My mother used to say frightened creatures remember the hands that hurt them, but they also remember the hands that wait." Her voice softened. "So I will wait." Beyond the glass, Alexander's expression changed. Not much. To most people, his face would have seemed as cold as before. But something in his eyes eased, then tightened with a different kind of pain. This girl did not know whose child she had saved. She did not know royal law would have rewarded her for bringing the pup to the authorities. She did not know that powerful families would have used Rowan as leverage, as a ladder, as a treasure to trade. She had found him hurt and carried him home because he was small, because he was alone, because everyone else had walked past. A distant shout rolled through the trees. Emily froze. The pup's ears flattened. Another shout followed, closer this time, and Tyler's voice rose through the wind. "Emily Carter, open that door." The file slipped from her fingers and tapped softly against the floor. Fear returned fast, familiar as breath. She looked at the pup, then at the door, then at the dying candle beside the bed. For 1 second, she was the girl at the gathering stone again, surrounded by laughter, told she had no worth, no standing, no right to decide anything. Then Rowan whimpered and pressed his face into the quilt. Emily stood. Her knees were still weak, her dress torn at the hem, her hair loose from running through the forest, but her eyes were clear. She lifted the pup carefully and carried him to the small pantry behind the stove, tucking him into a basket of folded blankets where the shadows were deepest. "Not a sound," she whispered, touching his head. "I will not let them take you." The door shook under a hard knock. Emily turned toward it, drawing one breath, then another. Outside, Alexander stepped back into the darkness, unseen by Tyler and the others as they reached the porch. He did not reveal himself yet, not because he doubted what he had seen, but because he needed to hear what Midnight Hollow would say when they believed the rejected Omega stood alone. Emily opened the door before Tyler could knock again, not because she was unafraid, but because fear had already taken too many things from her, and she refused to let it take the small life hidden behind her stove. Cold air rushed into the cabin, carrying snow, pine, and the sharp scent of arrogance. Tyler stood on the porch with Mason Cole and Brent Harlan behind him, both wrapped in dark coats, both wearing the restless smirks of boys who had mistaken rank for courage. A lantern swung from Mason's hand, throwing gold light over the doorway, and across Emily's torn dress. Tyler's eyes dropped to the mud on her hem, the scratches on her sleeves, the loose strands of hair clinging to her cheeks. "Look at you," he said softly. 1 hour rejected, and already embarrassing the pack. Emily kept one hand on the doorframe. "Go home, Tyler." His brows lifted, as if the words amused him. "You do not give orders here. This is my house. This is pack land," he corrected, stepping closer. "Everything on it answers to the alpha line, including you." Emily felt the old instinct pull at her spine, the trained need to lower her gaze, make herself smaller, survive by becoming less visible. She had done that for years. In the kitchen, when elders snapped their fingers. At ceremonies, when prettier wolves took the center of the room. At the gathering stone, when Tyler had spoken her rejection like a verdict and waited for her to break. But behind the stove, a little pup was breathing because she had chosen not to be small. So Emily lifted her chin. "There is nothing here for you." Brent leaned sideways, peering into the cabin. "Then you will not mind if we look." "I do mind." The words came out before she could soften them. Mason gave a short laugh. "She really thinks she is brave now." Tyler's expression cooled. "We saw what you carried. A stray pup with a strange scent. Maybe rogue. Maybe worse. If you bring trouble to Midnight Hollow, the elders will not protect you." "The elders have never protected me." For the first time, Tyler had no quick reply. The wind moved between them, lifting snow from the porch boards. Emily heard the pup shift faintly in the pantry basket, and her heart jumped. Tyler heard it too. His head tilted. "So it is inside." Emily stepped fully into the doorway, blocking his view with her body. "He is hurt. It is not your concern. He is a child." Tyler's mouth tightened. "It is an animal. So are we, when we forget mercy." The silence after that was so sudden even the trees seemed to hold still. Mason's smile vanished. Brent looked away first. Tyler stared at Emily as if seeing a stranger wearing the face of the girl he had discarded. "Careful," he said, voice low. "You are confused because rejection hurts. I understand that. But do not mistake pain for importance." The words landed where he meant them to land. Emily felt them press against the tender place inside her chest, the place still raw from the ceremony. For one breath, she almost believed him. Then the pup gave another small sound, weaker than before, and belief changed shape. It became something steadier than anger. "I was important enough for the moon to choose once," she said. "You were the one too proud to understand why." Tyler's face hardened. He reached for the door, but Emily did not move aside. She did not push him. She did not raise her voice. She simply stayed where she was, quiet as a locked gate. In the darkness beyond the porch, King Alexander Frost watched from beneath the shadow of a pine, his black cloak blending with the night. He heard every word. He watched the rejected Omega stand barefoot in the cold before 3 ranked wolves and protect a child she believed had no name, no value, no powerful father coming for him. Alexander had seen armies kneel from fear. He had seen nobles flatter him with polished voices. But he had rarely seen courage this plain, this unadorned, this costly. Tyler exhaled through his nose, forcing a smile back onto his face. "Fine. If you will not hand it over, we will bring the elders at dawn. Then this little act ends in front of everyone." Emily's fingers tightened against the doorframe. Dawn meant witnesses. Dawn meant judgment. Dawn meant the same pack that had laughed at her tonight would gather again to decide whether her mercy was a crime. Tyler stepped back from the porch, satisfaction already returning to his eyes. "Enjoy your last few hours pretending you matter." He turned into the snow, Mason and Brent following close behind. Emily waited until their lantern disappeared between the trees before closing the door. The moment the latch fell, her knees nearly gave out. She pressed her forehead to the wood, breathing through the ache, through the cold, through the fear of morning. Then she heard a soft rustle behind her. The pup had crawled from the basket, wobbling on unsteady legs, his amber eyes fixed on her. Emily rushed to him and gathered him carefully into her arms. "You were supposed to stay hidden," she whispered, but there was no scolding in her voice. The pup rested his head against her shoulder. Outside, Alexander looked toward the northern trail where his guards waited beyond the ridge. His decision had already been made. At dawn, Midnight Hollow would gather to judge Emily Carter, and the Alpha King would let them speak just long enough to reveal who they truly were. By the time the first gray light touched the tops of the pines, Emily had not slept. She sat on the floor beside the stove with the pup curled in her lap, one hand resting lightly over his back so she could feel each breath. The strange silver glow had not returned, but warmth still lingered under her skin, quiet and watchful, like an ember that knew when to wait. Outside, Midnight Hollow was waking. She heard distant doors opening, boots on snow, voices carrying through the cold morning air. Tyler had kept his promise. He had brought the pack. Emily looked toward the window and saw lanterns moving between the trees, dozens of them, then more, spreading across the ridge like fireflies trapped in winter. Her stomach tightened, but she did not move away from the pup. He had grown stronger in the last few hours. Not healed, not fully, but alive enough to lift his head whenever a sound came too close. Emily had removed the iron collar just before dawn, working slowly until the clasp gave with a soft click. Now it sat on the table beside the candle, the broken crown and 3 thorns turned upward like an accusation. She had wrapped it in cloth, but she could still feel its meaning in the room. Someone had taken him. Someone had wanted him hidden. Someone powerful enough to cross borders and foolish enough to leave a trail. A knock struck the door, formal this time, not Tyler's impatient pounding. Emily rose carefully, setting the pup in the basket with a blanket tucked around him. "Stay," she whispered. His amber eyes followed her, too bright, too aware. She opened the door to find Elder Martin Vale standing on the porch in his ceremonial coat, his silver hair tied at the nape of his neck, his expression arranged into disappointment before she had said a word. Behind him stood Tyler, Vanessa Reed, Mason, Brent, and nearly half the pack, all gathered in a wide half-circle across the snowy yard. Some looked curious. Some looked annoyed to be out in the cold. A few looked pleased, as if Emily's disgrace had become the morning's entertainment. Elder Vale sighed. "Emily Carter, you have been accused of bringing an unidentified wolf creature into pack territory without permission." "He is a pup," Emily said. "He was hurt." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Tyler stepped forward, his coat clean, his hair neatly combed, looking every inch the future alpha who expected the world to shape itself around his version of truth. "She was warned," he said. "She refused to listen. We do not know what that thing is, where it came from, or what danger it could bring." Vanessa folded her gloved hands, her voice smooth as polished glass. After last night, perhaps Emily was not thinking clearly. A few people nodded. Emily felt heat rise in her face, but she held Elder Vale's gaze. "I was thinking clearly enough to know that leaving a child in the snow was wrong." "A child," Tyler repeated, almost laughing. "You keep saying that as if it makes you noble." "No," Emily said quietly. "It makes him alive." The words settled over the yard, small but stubborn. Elder Vale looked past her into the cabin. "Bring it out." Emily's pulse jumped. "He is resting. Bring it out, or we will consider your refusal an admission of guilt." The old fear opened inside her, familiar and cold. For years, the pack had taught her that guilt could be assigned, not earned. If a cup broke near her, she had been careless. If a child cried after she comforted him, she had interfered. If Tyler rejected her, she must have been lacking. Now they were ready to turn mercy into another crime. Emily stepped back into the cabin. For a moment, her hand hovered over the basket. The pup looked up at her and gave a soft sound, trusting her again. "I am sorry," she whispered, "but I will carry you." She lifted him carefully, wrapped in the quilt, and returned to the porch. The moment the pack saw his silver-white fur, the murmurs sharpened. Someone whispered rogue. Someone else whispered cursed. Tyler's eyes fixed on the pup with satisfaction, as if its strangeness proved everything he wanted to believe. Then the pup's gaze moved past them all, beyond the crowd, toward the northern trail. His ears lifted. Emily felt him tremble, but this time it was not fear. Far off, under the pale morning sky, a deep horn sounded once. The entire pack turned. Horses appeared between the pines, black and powerful, carrying riders in dark winter armor marked with the white wolf of the northern throne. The murmurs died instantly. Elder Vale went pale. Tyler took one step back. At the center of the riders, a tall man in a black cloak rode forward without hurry, his silver-gray eyes sweeping over the yard with a silence that made every breath seem too loud. Emily did not know his name yet, but every wolf around her did. One by one, the pack dropped to their knees in the snow. King Alexander Frost had arrived. For a moment, no one moved except the horses, their breath rising in white clouds against the morning air. King Alexander Frost dismounted without haste, and that made him more terrifying than any shout could have been. He was tall enough that even the ranked wolves of Midnight Hollow seemed smaller around him, his black cloak falling from broad shoulders dusted with snow, his pale face calm, unreadable, and cold as the northern sky. The royal guards remained behind him in perfect silence, their armor marked with the white wolf crest, but Emily felt at once that they were not the true force in the yard. He was. Every instinct in the gathered pack recognized it. Elder Vale lowered his head until his forehead nearly touched the snow. Tyler dropped to one knee beside him, his expression drained of its easy cruelty. Vanessa followed, her perfect coat brushing the ground, her eyes wide with fear she tried to hide. Emily stood alone on the porch, holding the pup against her chest, because kneeling would mean letting go of him, and letting go was the one thing her heart refused to do. She expected someone to order her down. No one dared speak. Alexander's eyes moved over the pack first, slowly, taking in the circle of witnesses, the lanterns, the faces that had gathered not to help but to accuse. Then his gaze found Emily. It did not strike like Tyler's gaze. It did not crawl over her torn dress or bare feet or wind-tangled hair looking for weakness. It settled on her hands, on the careful way she supported the pup, on the dried tracks of tears across her cheeks, and finally on the small silver-white head tucked beneath her chin. The pup stirred. His ears lifted. A sound came from him, soft and broken with relief. Emily looked down, startled, as the little wolf pushed weakly against the quilt, trying to reach the man in the yard. Alexander's control cracked for only a second, but Emily saw it. His face remained still, yet his eyes changed. The cold in them did not vanish. It opened. He crossed the snow, each step quiet, and the pack seemed to shrink away from his path. Emily should have been afraid. A part of her was. This was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the man mothers whispered about when storms rolled over the mountains, the ruler whose law could raise or ruin a pack before sunset. But when he reached the porch, he did not look at Emily as if she were beneath him. He looked at the pup. Rowan, he said, and the name left him like a prayer he had held behind his teeth for too long. The yard went silent in a way that felt different from fear. Emily's arms loosened, not enough to surrender the pup, only enough for him to lift his head. Rowan made another small sound and stretched one paw toward Alexander. The Alpha King sank to one knee in the snow before them. Gasps moved through the pack. Not loud. No one was brave enough for loud. But Emily heard them. She felt them ripple across the yard. Their king, the man no one in the north had ever seen bow to another living soul, had knelt at the feet of a rejected Omega's porch because of the child in her arms. Alexander removed one glove and reached out carefully, not taking, not commanding, waiting. Emily understood that patience before she understood anything else. Slowly, she lowered Rowan into his father's hands. The pup pressed his face against Alexander's palm, and the king closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them again, the father was still there, but the king had returned with him. Alexander stood with Rowan cradled securely against his chest, then looked toward Elder Vale. Who found him? Elder Vale swallowed. Your Majesty, the situation was unclear. The girl failed to report the creature, and we were attempting to determine whether she had endangered the pack. Alexander's gaze did not move. I asked who found him. The elder's mouth opened, but no answer came. Tyler stepped in quickly, desperate to reclaim control. Emily found it near the creek, Your Majesty. We warned her not to bring it here. She acted without permission. Alexander looked at him then, and Tyler's confidence collapsed into silence. Without permission, the king repeated. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the yard like winter over a frozen lake. Emily hugged her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the cold now that Rowan was no longer against her. Alexander turned back to her. Did you know who he was? Emily shook her head. No, why carry him home? The question was simple. The answer should have been simple too, but her throat tightened around it. She looked at Rowan, safe in his father's arms, then at the pack still kneeling in the snow. Because he was hurt, she said, and everyone else had already walked away. Alexander did not answer Emily at once. He looked at her as if the truth of that sentence had crossed the yard and stood between them, plain and impossible to ignore. Because he was hurt. Because everyone else had walked away. No title. No bargain. No attempt to make herself important. Only the kind of answer that could not be polished for reward because it had been born in the dark, before she knew anyone powerful would ever hear it. Rowan shifted in his arms, pressing closer beneath the king's cloak, and Alexander lowered his gaze to the pup's wrapped leg. His thumb brushed lightly over the edge of the bandage, careful not to disturb it. "Who bound this?" he asked. Emily's voice was quiet. "I did." "And the collar?" She glanced toward the cabin. "On the table. I removed it before dawn." A shadow moved across Alexander's face. "Bring it." Elder Vale started to rise, but Alexander's eyes stopped him before he fully stood. "Not you." The elder froze. Alexander turned back to Emily. "Miss Carter." No one in Midnight Hollow had called her that in years. Not with respect. Not with her name standing straight, instead of bent beneath insult. Emily stepped into the cabin, aware of every stare on her back, and picked up the cloth-wrapped collar from the table. Her hands trembled only once. When she returned, Alexander accepted it without touching her fingers, as if even now he would not take more from her than she freely gave. He unfolded the cloth. The dark iron glinted in the pale morning. The broken crown and 3 thorns faced the crowd. One of the royal guards drew in a sharp breath. "Blackbriar," he said. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Smugglers who steal royal blood and sell fear to the highest bidder." The pack went still. Tyler's face lost the last of its color. Vanessa looked at the ground. Elder Vale began speaking too quickly. "Your Majesty, had we known the pup was royal, of course our response would have been different." Alexander's gaze lifted. "That is the problem." The elder blinked. The king's voice remained low, but every word landed cleanly in the snow. "You should not need a crown to recognize a child in need." No one answered. The wind moved through the pines, and for the first time, Emily saw shame touch faces that had laughed at her the night before. Some lowered their heads because the king had commanded silence without raising his voice. Others lowered them because they remembered the footprints near the creek, the chances they had taken to walk away, the easy choice that had let them sleep while a small life waited in the snow. Tyler tried again, but his voice no longer carried the strength he expected from himself. "She still concealed him from the pack. She defied my order." Alexander turned to him fully. "Your order was to abandon my son." Tyler swallowed. "I did not know he was your son. You knew he was injured." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Tyler looked away first, and something in the yard shifted. Not mercy yet. Not justice fully. But the first crack in the story everyone had told about Emily Carter. Alexander handed the collar to a guard, then looked to Elder Vale. "Midnight Hollow will surrender all records of border patrols from the past 7 days. Every path, every watch post, every name." Elder Vale bowed, so low his coat brushed the snow. "Yes, Your Majesty." Then Alexander turned toward Emily again. Rowan lifted his head from the king's cloak and gave a small, eager sound, as if calling to her. The sound undid her more than the pack's stares. Emily took one step forward before remembering herself and stopping. Alexander noticed. He always noticed. "He trusts you," he said. Emily folded her cold hands together. "He was afraid. He is not afraid now." Rowan stretched one paw toward her. The yard watched in stunned silence as the Alpha King stepped closer and allowed his son to reach the rejected Omega again. Emily touched the pup's paw with 2 fingers. The warmth beneath her skin flickered awake, faint silver light pulsing once and fading quickly. Alexander saw it. So did Elder Vale. So did Tyler. A murmur rose, frightened and amazed. Emily pulled her hand back as if she had done something wrong. Alexander's eyes sharpened, but not with suspicion. With recognition. "Who taught you that?" he asked. Emily shook her head, breath catching. "No one. It happened last night. I do not know what it is." For the first time, the cold king's voice softened enough for only her to feel it. "It is not a crime to carry light, Miss Carter." Emily's throat tightened. Behind her, the pack that had called her useless stared as if the snow itself had opened and shown them a secret. Alexander removed the heavy black cloak from his shoulders and placed it around Emily, covering her torn dress, her chilled arms, and the quiet dignity they had tried to strip away. "Until this matter is resolved," he said, turning so every wolf could hear. "Emily Carter is under the protection of the Northern Throne." The cloak settled around Emily like warmth she had forgotten she was allowed to feel. It smelled faintly of cedar, winter air, and the clean sharpness of snow over stone. For a moment, she could not move. The entire pack was staring at her, but this time their eyes did not make her shrink. They looked at the black royal cloak covering her shoulders, the white wolf crest fastened near her collarbone, and something changed in the way they understood the space she occupied. She was still Emily Carter. Still the girl who scrubbed the kitchen floors, carried baskets from the market, and ate alone at the end of long tables. But the world had shifted 1 inch beneath her feet, and that single inch felt like a mountain moving. Tyler rose halfway from his kneel, outrage fighting with fear across his face. Your Majesty, with respect, she is a rejected Omega. She has no training, no rank, no proof that her strange light is safe. Alexander's eyes moved to him. You speak often for a man who has said nothing useful. A few wolves lowered their heads quickly, hiding their reactions. Tyler went rigid. Vanessa touched his sleeve as if warning him to stop, but pride had always been louder in him than wisdom. I only mean the pack deserves caution. Last night, she was unstable, emotional. She ran into the woods after the ceremony, and now this power appears. It could be a trick. Emily felt the words brush against old wounds. Unstable, emotional, trick. Different names for the same cage. Alexander looked at her, not asking permission aloud, yet somehow waiting for it. Emily drew the cloak tighter and stepped forward until she stood at the edge of the porch. I did run, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried because no one else dared speak over it. I ran because your celebration was built on my humiliation. I ran because I wanted one place where no one was laughing. Then I heard Rowan. The pup lifted his head at his name, and Emily's expression softened before she looked back at the pack. I did not know he was royal. I did not know anyone would thank me. I only knew he was cold, hurt, and alone. If that makes me dangerous, then maybe this pack has forgotten what danger really is. Silence followed. Not empty silence. Listening silence. Elder Vale's face had gone pale with the effort of deciding whether shame or self-preservation mattered more. At last, he bowed toward Emily, stiffly, awkwardly. Miss Carter, perhaps mistakes were made. Emily almost laughed, but it would have hurt too much. Mistakes are when someone drops a cup. You all saw him in the snow. A woman near the back covered her mouth. Mason looked down at his boots. Brent shifted behind Tyler, unable to meet her eyes. Alexander watched Emily with an expression no one in Midnight Hollow knew how to read. It was not pity. Pity stood above pain and felt noble for noticing it. This was recognition, and it felt steadier. He turned to his guards. Search the creek crossing. Follow every track leading away from the collar's site. Quietly. No one leaves Midnight Hollow until I permit it. The guards bowed and moved at once, disappearing between the trees with disciplined speed. Then Rowan stirred in Alexander's arms and whined toward Emily again. The king glanced down at his son, and the cold line of his mouth softened by the smallest measure. He is asking for you. Emily blinked. For me? You brought him back from fear. Children remember that. She stepped closer, hesitant under the weight of every watching eye. Rowan pushed his nose against her hand. The silver warmth flickered again, gentle as a candle behind glass. This time Emily did not pull away. She let it rise just enough to calm his trembling, just enough for his breathing to settle. A ripple of awe passed through the pack. Elder Vale whispered, moon blessed. Tyler's face twisted. Impossible. Alexander heard him. No. Inconvenient. Then he looked at Emily, and the yard, the pack, the snow, even the bitter memory of the gathering stone seemed to fall back from the quiet force of his attention. There are healers in the north who study gifts like yours, he said. Rare gifts. Old gifts. They do not appear in empty souls. Emily's eyes stung. All her life, they had called her empty because her wolf was quiet, because her rank was low, because Tyler had not wanted what destiny offered him. Now the Alpha King of the Northern Territories stood before the pack and spoke of her as if something sacred had been hidden where they had only seen weakness. Alexander shifted Rowan carefully to one arm, then extended his free hand, palm open, not commanding, not claiming, simply offering a choice in front of everyone who had denied her one. Come to the Northern Citadel as my honored guest, Emily Carter. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner, as the woman who saved my son. the breath caught in her chest. Behind Alexander, the northern road waited, white and unknown beneath the morning light. Behind Emily, the cabin held every lonely year she had survived. She looked once at Tyler, who had rejected her before the moon, then at the child who trusted her, and finally at the king whose hand remained steady in the cold. Slowly, Emily placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, the silver light beneath her skin answered something deep and ancient in his eyes, and every wolf in the yard felt the air change. The air changed so quietly that at first Emily thought only she had felt it. A soft pressure moved through the snowy yard, not wind, not sound, but something older than both, like the moment before sunrise when the dark finally understands it cannot stay. Her hand rested in Alexander's, warm beneath the chill, and the silver light under her skin rose to meet a pale glow flickering in his eyes. The pack drew in a single breath. Even Tyler stopped moving. Emily heard a low whisper pass through the kneeling wolves. Mate bond. The words should have frightened her. All her life, destiny had been used against her, measured by rank, scent, approval, and the pride of men who believe the moon only blessed the strong. But this did not feel like a chain. It felt like a door opening somewhere deep inside her, somewhere she had long ago locked because no one had ever knocked gently. Alexander's fingers did not tighten around hers. He did not pull her closer. He simply looked at her, giving her the dignity of space even while the whole yard trembled with recognition. "Emily," he said, her name low and steady, as if he had known how to say it long before this morning. "You owe me nothing because of what the moon has revealed." The word struck her harder than any claim could have. No demand, no possession, no royal decree disguised as romance. Just choice. Her throat tightened. Rowan wriggled in Alexander's arm and reached toward her again, breaking the silence with a small, impatient sound. Emily laughed softly through sudden tears, and the sound startled the pack more than the light had. She touched the pup's head, and he settled at once, his amber eyes blinking sleepily between her and his father. Alexander turned toward the gathered wolves. The warmth left his expression, though his hand remained open beside Emily's. "Midnight Hollow will remember this morning," he said. "Not because I arrived. Because before I did, a rejected Omega did what every ranked wolf here failed to do." Elder Vale bowed his head. "Your Majesty, we ask forgiveness." Alexander's gaze was winter clear. "Ask it from the girl you taught to believe kindness was weakness." The elder turned toward Emily, but she raised one hand before he could speak, not to silence him cruelly, but because she finally understood that she did not need his apology to become whole. "Not today," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Today I am taking Rowan somewhere safe." Alexander's eyes softened at the name on her lips. Tyler rose unsteadily, shame and disbelief fighting across his face. "Emily, I was wrong. Once, those words would have been everything she wanted. Once, she might have spent nights imagining them, shaping them into a key that could open the cage he left her in. Now they sounded small against the morning." Emily looked at him with sadness, not hatred. "You were," she said, "but I am not waiting here for you to understand why." She stepped down from the porch, the king's cloak brushing the snow behind her. The pack parted, not because of fear this time, but because no one knew how to stand in the way of a woman they had watched rise from shame without becoming cruel. At the edge of the yard, one of the royal guards brought forward a dark horse with a silver saddle blanket. Alexander helped Rowan settle safely in a padded travel sling held by a healer from his escort, then turned to Emily. "The northern citadel is nearly 40 miles from here," he said. "The road is cold, but you will not walk it alone." Emily looked back once at the cabin. The small house had sheltered her loneliness, her grief, and the miracle she had not known lived in her hands. She would return one day, perhaps, not as the girl they sent away, but as the woman who chose when to come back. Then she faced the northern road. Snow glimmered across the pines. Morning light spilled over the ridge. Somewhere inside her, a quiet wolf stirred for the first time, not howling, not demanding, simply waking. Emily placed one hand over her heart and felt the silver warmth answer. Alexander mounted beside her, Rowan sleeping peacefully between the care of the guards and the healer, and the royal procession began to move. Behind them, Midnight Hollow remained kneeling in the snow, watching the rejected Omega leave beneath the protection of a king. Ahead, The North waited with its secrets, its dangers, and its throne carved from ice and moonstone. Emily did not know what she would become there. She only knew this. The night she carried one abandoned pup home, she had carried herself out of abandonment too. And for the first time in her life, destiny did not feel like something that had happened to her. It felt like something walking beside her,